has come early for this hashtag AvGeek. They have allowed me into Boeing in Everett. We've got planes, planes, and planes galore as Quest Means Business comes live from Everett in Washington State. Here in this corner of America, Boeing churns out its biggest money-making exports for the country, aeroplanes. Over the next hour, join me as we go inside another component of America Inc., the Boeing Company. To you and a warm welcome to the Puget Sound region. Look at the size of that, eh? You'll hear more about that during the course of the program. But they are brand new Dreamliners waiting to be, well, they're being manufactured and then to be delivered. And we're at Boeing's largest factory at Everett. And in a few moments, we'll be speaking exclusively to the man in charge of Boeing, the chief executive, Dennis Muilenburg. Boeing has an outsized impact, not only on the US economy, but the global economy, markets, and perhaps for you and me, most important, how we travel. Throughout the course of the program, since 1916, Boeing has been in the business of building machines that fly. Now it's facing a variety of turbulence on the ground. We're familiar with them. A trade war, sanctions on Iran, the unconventional Trump administration. Then you've got the issues relating to Boeing itself as the largest exporter that has billions of dollars at stake, all at the same time. Forget the government, forget the tariffs, forget the trade. Let's look at actually doing business. Oh, yes. It's locked in battle, a brutal battle with Airbus for dominance in the sky. Every order, every plane. And all as this company's engineers work out how to propel us faster and further in the skies and in space. Boeing is truly a unique company. So we'll look back at the iconic machines that Boeing designed and how they built the planes that you and I now fly today. That's all ahead in this hour on this special edition of Quest Means Business. And so let's continue with the planes themselves. Let's begin with this extraordinary legacy of Boeing. Over the last 100 years, each generation of aircraft has surpassed the last. So let us enjoy a look at Boeing's famous planes. For more than a century, from humble beginnings, from planes made of canvas and wood, to modern aeroplanes, helicopters, and space rockets, Bill Boeing's founding philosophy was build something better, and he did. Boeing started by selling seaplanes to the US Navy in World War I, forming a military alliance which stands today. In the 1930s, they redesigned those flying boats into the Clippers and opened up new routes across the Pacific. And then Boeing ushered in the jet age with the 707 single-aisle plane that flew at similar speeds to today. It was the first commercially successful jetliner. The 1960s brought Boeing another winner, the 737. It's the most successful plane ever built. The latest fuel-efficient MAX version is hugely popular with airlines, and there are more than 4,000 737s still to be delivered. From small and nimble to big and bold, the jumbo jet, the 747, democratized flying. In the 1990s, Boeing went big and twin-engined with the 777, a totally new plane. As an airline, you weren't a player if you didn't have the 777. A new century, a totally new plane, the 787 Dreamliner. Quite simply, Boeing can't make these planes fast enough. And with new versions, the 787 remains state-of-the-art. Boeing's famous planes show that when they try, they change aviation. And now the talk is, what comes next? Will Boeing be brave enough to launch another plane from scratch? Joining me now for our exclusive interview, Boeing's President, Chairman and Chief Executive, Dennis Muilenburg. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Richard.
And firstly, thank you for allowing Crestmead's business to come from here, besides letting this kid have a play in the candy store.
Yeah.
So let's talk first. There are so many issues about Boeing, but when you became chief executive just a few years ago, what was your priority? Little could you have realized that your company was going to suddenly become pretty much at the heart of some very nasty political battles.
Well, when I had the chance to take over the company a couple of years ago, we were just on the verge of celebrating our centennial. So we were thinking about, what does that next century of aviation look like? And the fact that we're in a growing global business and the network traffic in the world is growing at about 6 to 7% a year. And so how do we take advantage of this incredible growth market, continue to deliver value for all of our stakeholders, and then really transform Boeing for its second century?
And now, but very quickly, once you took the job, the company did become enmeshed in some extremely difficult political waters. And we're talking here about, obviously, the new administration in Washington, the Trump administration. We're not going to dwell on it unduly and too long, but let's look at the trade question first. President Trump, as you're just going to, has been quite clear in his opposition to China trade at the moment and the introduction of tariffs that he has introduced. What is Boeing's policy on tariffs?
The key is to put this in the overall context of global trade. So certainly global trade is extremely important to Boeing and our customers. Air traffic by its nature is global. And we see traffic growing around the world, as I said, 6 to 7% a year. And we're seeing things that the administration is doing today that's enabling our growth. So I put it in the context of tax reform, which has been incredibly beneficial, allowing us to invest in innovation in our workforce. Regulatory reform is making us more competitive and helping us compete worldwide. Now, we do have some challenges around tariffs and trade. We have some concerns there, but the fact is we have a voice at the table. And we see the administration leaning forward to support us as a business while we deal with the realities of the trade situation.
Let's just listen to what President Trump said about Boeing and about China, because it relates to your ability to do business in one of the newest markets, most important markets in the world.
Okay.
One that is even more bothersome, frankly, is Boeing. So Boeing, and I've been talking about this for a long time, Boeing is going to sell 300 jets to China. But as part of the deal, they're going to set up a massive plant in a big section of China. They're going to build planes over in China. And you tell me why. Why aren't they building them here and sending them? They're building them over there. That'll end up taking a tremendous number of jobs away from the United States. And people can say whatever they want, but that's not good stuff.
All right, you obviously are familiar with that. Are you still committed to the China factory?
We are. And when you take a look at the global marketplace for airplanes over the next 20 years, the world needs 43,000 new airplanes. About 7,200 of those are in China. It's a really important market for us. We are building a 737 finishing center in China today that complements the work we do here in the U.S. I think our approach to global growth is different than what you see in many companies. We have a win-win approach where we're looking for growth in all countries around the world. So while we're investing in that finishing center in China, which allows us to grow in China, it's also allowing us to ramp up production here in the U.S., which is adding manufacturing jobs here.
So, but how do you square that circle with a president who believes that everything should be done in the United States rather than putting some of it into China? There is a straightforward difference of view on that, as exemplified.
I think the difference is the structure of the aerospace business. So our business grows in the U.S. when we invest in factory and capacity outside of the U.S. The China example is a very real one, but I'll give you more examples. Saudi Arabia, where we're investing in a rotorcraft support center, growing jobs in Saudi Arabia is allowing us to grow our Chinook helicopter line here in the U.S. In the aerospace business, a global supply chain, and the fact that our customers are global and our airplanes are delivered globally, there's an advantage to the U.S. to having capability in other countries.
I assume you make this argument and you put this point to the president and the administration every time you meet.
We do, and we've had very good conversations on this topic. What I applaud the president for is the fact that he's brought business to the table. We have a voice at the table. Our concerns are understood.
Well, except you have a voice at the table, and that's certainly true now, that you didn't have before. But I wonder if it's a lip service voice. Is anybody actually listening? You've been now to numerous White House events, including earlier this week in New Jersey, where I'm sure you made the points again. Unless you'd like to tell us, but I'm sure you won't want to reveal those conversations. But is anybody listening to you?
They are, and it's showing up in actions. Again, I'll go back to a great example, tax reform. We were very much at the table for that. We talked about the benefits of tax reform here in the U.S., unleashing innovation. That's exactly what it's done. It's allowed us to grow manufacturing jobs. It's allowed us to invest in our workforce. You see some of that in our factory space here. Regulatory reform, we've been listened to. And even on the trade front, there's an understanding and a realization that aerospace generates an $80 billion a year trade surplus for the U.S.
Let's look at your share price. It's done spectacularly well, 220% over the last 5 years, 100% or so in the last 14, 15 months or whatever. But if we look at a more narrow area of just the last 6 months, for example, we see something that looks more like the Himalayas. Or the Alps and the mountains, the sheer number of ups and downs. They are predicated purely on the fact that China might take retaliatory action against yourselves.
We've seen some recent volatility in the market. There's no question about that. But again, you have to look at Boeing from a long-term perspective. We are a long-term business. And when I take a look at stock price and return to shareholders, this is a long-term effort. And you've mentioned the fact that our stock price has gone up and there's been shareholder value over the last couple of years that have been generated by our amazing team. And when you look at the growth prospects in aviation, we are very confident this is a long-term sustained growth business. And while there are quarter to quarter, there may be some market volatility, the strength of the long-term view of our market is very clear.
Do you worry that as part of this trade, I'm going to call it a trade war, you can disagree with that phrase. I know people have disagreed whether the US is currently in that. Do you believe, or are you worried that as part of this trade war, when China runs out of things to tariff, it will start to use non-tariff barriers against you and your planes, making it more difficult? Do you worry?
Sure, that's a concern for us, and we voiced that concern. But again, it's important to realize that China also gains benefit from this aerospace business. China is growing by leaps and bounds. They need the lift capacity in country. Right. Every year we have 100 million new passengers in Asia. They need the airplanes. Aerospace is good for the Chinese economy. It's good for manufacturing jobs here in the U.S.
Do you feel caught in the middle sometimes? CEOs like yourselves, we saw with the President's Council, you sometimes feel you're caught in the middle.
I don't think we're caught in the middle. I think the fact is we're involved in the discussion. We're at the table. And I like having a voice at the table. And I'd much rather be engaged than being in the background. And the fact that we're engaged, we have a voice at the table, it's making a difference, and I see the administration leaning forward with a pro-business agenda.
I've got to ask you then, beautifully put, if you've got a seat at the table, you have a responsibility. If you have a responsibility, you're part of the debate, you'd agree. Today in this country, we are seeing CEOs being, we've called them on Crestmeans Business, the moral barometers in many cases, having to take stands on issues, doesn't matter what issue, that's in the public domain, that previously was always either government or whether it be, for example, the transgender bathroom battle, the LGBT rights, women's leave, whatever it might be. CEOs are now leading the agenda. Are you prepared for that?
Yeah. Well, we're, again, very engaged in that dialogue. I have a responsibility as the CEO to take care of my business and to develop value for all of our stakeholders. I also have a responsibility to run a company that has the right value set. And the great thing about the Boeing company is we've been based on that for 100 years. We operate under this context of values. So the importance of things like safety and diversity, bringing all the best ideas to the table, integrity in how we do our work, quality. You know, the very nature of our products demands excellence. People's lives depend on what we do. That drives a sense of value and excellence in how we run the business. So that's part of my job is the culture.
Right, but when those values come into conflict or seemingly come into conflict with a policy, doesn't matter which government it is, where in the world, but we can take the example of the immigration policies here in the United States, where many of your colleagues, your counterparts in Silicon Valley came out very forcefully against the travel ban, against the restrictions on HP1s and all of those sort of things. Are you prepared to put your views on the line in the same way that they are? Is this something you have to do as a chief exec?
We're engaged every day in that dialogue. Again, I'll say the most important thing I do as a CEO is invest in our people, invest in our business.
Even when it gets nasty, even when it gets dirty, even when it gets ugly, can you be your...
We never, ever compromise on our values. The values we have as a company, our integrity, the quality that we provide, the safety that we demand, that cannot be altered. That is a foundation that we stand on every day. No matter how many business pressures there are, no matter what issues may come up, we stand on that values foundation. But again, by having a seat at the table, I can be involved in those discussions. And we may not agree on everything. You know, we engage with both sides of the aisle. We engage with governments around the world. We don't always agree on every point, but we're engaged, we're involved, because we're a global business and we're based on values.
Well, we'll turn our attention to another matter in a moment. Finally, what is it, for this part of our discussion, what is it like to negotiate with the President of the United States, who wrote The Art of the Deal? Have a listen to what the President said on Air Force One, and then we'll talk more.
Well, the plane is totally out of control. It's going to be over $4 billion. It's for Air Force One program. And I think it's ridiculous. I think Boeing is doing a little bit of a number. We want Boeing to make a lot of money, but not that much money. Okay, thank you.
Boeing doing a little bit of a number. What's it like negotiating?
Well, he's a tough negotiator, but you know, he's a good businessman. He understands business, and again, we speak the same language. And this discussion we had around Air Force One, from a company standpoint, that's a really important effort for us. This is something we do on behalf of the country. We're proud to have the President flying on Air Force One. And the negotiations we've had are good, strong negotiations, and frankly, coming to the table with ideas on how can we streamline certification processes. How can we make Air Force One procurement more commercial-like in its nature? So there have been things that have been done by the administration to help us take cost out and streamline the process. So there's give and take, and I think it's a great process. And as a result, the taxpayers are getting a great deal.
You don't wince when you see a tweet. You know, it doesn't sink when you hear that who's on the phone. Not a single is on the phone. Obviously, it's an honor to speak to the President.
It's a tremendous honor. And the fact that he's involved in these negotiations, right, we're providing the best value for our customers, best value for the taxpayers. And, you know, I'm honored to be involved in that discussion. We're doing important work for the country, and it matters.
When we come back after the break, we're going to turn our attention from the important work to the country to the important work from Boeing. And we're going to talk about the planes. This is the 787, which costs about $260 million, I believe.
List price?
List price. Not that anybody in their right mind has ever paid the list price. However, I'm hopeful if I ask nicely, you'll give me a discount. We'll be with you after the break to talk about your planes.
Thanks, Richard.